Hello and welcome to this special Leadership Spotlight series brought to you by World Green Building Council as part of World Green Building Week 2020. In support of this year's campaign, Act on Climate, we are delighted to bring you a series of conversations involving industry leaders already acting on climate to discuss the opportunities net zero buildings present in addressing some of the most critical issues of our time. This year, we are calling on governments to implement policy to drastically reduce emissions from the building and construction sector. Throughout this week, our network is highlighting the action being taken by businesses, governments, and green building councils to drive uptake of net zero buildings and the benefits they bring. This is across the development of resilient communities, the health of our planet and society, and the growth of thriving economies. It's important to note our industry is ready. We're ready to mainstream net zero buildings. Bolder and more ambitious regulation is now required to unlock their full potential. This series is hosted by a staff member from the World Green Building Council in conversation with industry experts related to specific topics. On Monday, we heard a fascinating discussion led by our CEO, Christina Gamboa, on the response to COVID to build back better. On Tuesday, we heard from our Katrina Brady and panelists on enhancing human health with net zero buildings. Yesterday, the Director for Advancing Net Zero, Victoria Burrows, talked about net zeros and the possibilities for community, the planet, and economies. Today, we're discussing embodied carbon and bringing the topic of embodied carbon up front. And tomorrow, the last in our series, is looking at net zero buildings restoring the health of the planet. This is led by Dominika Savinska, who is the Director of Membership and Regional Networks at World Green Building Council. If you missed any of the first 3 days, please don't fret. We have these on our YouTube channel, so please do visit that if you'd like to see those presentations. Of course, World Green Building Week wouldn't be World Green Building Week without everyone getting involved. You can get involved by submitting your questions through the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. We'll keep an eye on this throughout the session and bring them in where we can. You can also get involved on social media. Share your involvement in our event by posting and using the hashtags below here, Act on Climate and World Green Building Week 2020. You can visit our World Green Building Week website to find out how you can learn, share, and lead on net zero buildings. You can also find there our call to action statement, calling for governments to implement policy for net zero buildings and submit your endorsement of this statement. My name is Matthew Adams. I'm the Project Manager of Advancing Net Zero here at World Green Building Council, and I am the moderator for today's panel. As a member of the team for the last 3 years, I've been heavily involved in the project's work on embodied carbon through the Bringing Embodied Carbon Upfront publication of last year, and the soon to be launched as part of this session, Asia Pacific Embodied Carbon Primer. For today's panel, I am delighted to welcome the first panelist, MK Leung, who is the Director of Sustainable Design at Ronald Lewin Partners since 2012. Under MK's leadership, his team delivered the first ever zero carbon building in Hong Kong. MK has been active in academic and professional circles related to the issue of building performance, energy efficient building design, and green architecture. And he has been serving as the director of the Hong Kong Green Building Council since 2016. Welcome, MK. Next, we have Barbara Chrysler, who is the Director of Professional Lighting in the Global Public and Government Affairs Department at Signify. Barbara is responsible for global strategic outreach and stakeholder management of public-private partnerships with a focus on energy, climate change, and smart city programs. As such, she enables and facilitates the transition of cities, states, and regions to energy-efficient, sustainable LED lighting solutions and Internet of Things, IoT-enabled lighting systems and services. Welcome to the panel, Barbara. Next, we have Eugene Thayer, who also joins us today. Eugene is the Managing Director of Smart City Solutions, as well as Senior Director of Special Projects at Sabana Jurong. Eugene joined the Sabana Jurong Group on the 1st of January 2017 as a Senior Director in the Group CEO's office to spearhead and oversee the Group's special projects and strategic initiatives. In particular, the Group's Key Account Management Office, Digital Management Office, and Sustainability and Resilience, and Technologies Office as well. Lots of offices there. So Eugene, if you could turn on your camera, please. And show you. Thank you very much. And finally, we have Rick Walters, who is the Director of Infrastructure at GRESB. Rick is an experienced sustainability professional with more than 25 years experience in sustainability, investment, management, and engineering. His career spans the infrastructure lifecycle through design, construction, and operation phases. He aspires to be at the forefront of industry change, making a difference every day. So a big thank you to our panelists. I'm going to turn off my slides now. Thank you everyone for joining us today and being here. I am going to switch. So to start off, I just wanted to provide a bit of context here on what we're here to do and talk about. So regarding embodied carbon, to achieve net zero by 2050, as called for through the Paris Agreement globally, the built environment must play a vital role as it is responsible for 39% of global energy-related carbon emissions. With large predicted growth and urbanization, global building stock is expected to double around the middle of this century. This means more emissions from construction, manufacturing, and operations of buildings and infrastructure. If we are to stay within our carbon budget and meet the 2050 target that has been set out, we must decarbonize the whole life cycle of our built assets, both buildings and infrastructure. This means not only the emissions released during operation, so the energy to heat, cool, and power our buildings, but also during the manufacturing, transportation, construction, and end-of-life phases known as embodied carbon. These emissions contribute around 11% of all global energy-related carbon emissions and roughly 1/3 of building sector emissions. As operational carbon is reduced, embodied carbon will continue to grow in importance as a proportion of total emissions. Historically, these emission sources have seen less uptake globally, action that is, than operational carbon due to limited data, limited awareness, and complex fragmentation of responsibilities and accountabilities within our supply chain. We are here to discuss today with our panel their perspectives on the importance of embodied carbon and what levers we can pull to remove barriers and accelerate action on this topic as part of a whole life cycle approach. But first, I'd really like to know what you think. So how important is embodied carbon? So I'm going to start the first poll that we have today. So I'm going to launch that. And if everyone can please vote and let us know, I'll give people 30 seconds and then we can hear from our panelists and see what they think. Okay, so I'm just going to share the poll results with everyone now. As we can see, I think the job's done really with all the panelists. We can all pack up and go home because 73% of people here believe that it is very important, with the other 27 saying important. But we can see if we can't bring that 27 up at the end of the session overall. Just going to close the poll now. Great. So I would like to ask the panelists now, how important is embodied carbon to you? There has been a shift towards whole life cycle thinking globally with this focus over the last couple of years, at least from what I've seen. So how important is it, and how has this been reflected in your work, your organization to date? I might start with Barbara, if I can.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthew. Obviously, this is a topic that for us at Signify, the world leader in lighting, has been an extremely important topic for a very long time. When you think about it, embodied carbon is very much linked to circular economy and life cycle thinking, and the lighting industry as a whole has done an extremely good job in the last 30 years when it comes to the life cycle. Back then, in the times of the incandescent light bulb, the lifetime of an incandescent light bulb was about 1,000 hours or 1 year. And with the invention of LED, that has increased to 50 to 100,000 hours. Or so the embodiment of the carbon defector has actually been increased by 50. So we have seen quite a tremendous shift here. And how has this been done? Well, one important factor is, of course, the design of the LED, which has been designed in a very highly efficient manner. It's upgradable, and it has modular components, which means if something fails, not the entire luminaire has to be replaced, but certain models can be. And that, of course, then also extends the life cycle of the entire product. Let me also announce to you, and perhaps some of you might have already read it, but now in September, we have actually announced that we have become fully carbon neutral in our operations worldwide, and we are using 100% renewable energy. We're the first lighting company worldwide to achieve this target. And as a manufacturer, this hasn't been an easy journey. And so we are all extremely proud that we have been able to achieve it. But of course, we are not going to stop there. And we have just announced our next 5-year target until 2025. In the last 10 years now, we've been able to reduce our operational emissions by 70%. And we have done that, well, through our energy efficient products, through improvements in logistics, less business travel, and also more sustainable transportation modes. So let me stop here by now, but I think, yeah, that obviously for us, this is a very important topic that we continue to be involved in. Perhaps one last thing, as a lighting manufacturer, our focus is mostly on the operational carbon, meaning the carbon that is used in the use phase when the customer is using our product, because 90% of the carbon footprint is from the operational side, and only 10% is in manufacturing and end of life. And this is why for us as a company, the focus on energy efficiency is so crucial.
Thanks, Barbara. I think it raises a really good point there regarding being so upfront within the supply chain. The manufacturing's focus on those operational efficiencies will then mean down the track to the consumer who's implementing the lighting designer who's picking it, they would have low embodied carbon because of all those amazing achievements. And congratulations on carbon neutrality as well. I'd like to bring MK in. So the manufacturer is designing some nice lighting that's low embodied carbon. How do architects go about including it there, and how important is it? You're on mute there, sorry, MK. Have you got audio there? No audio, so I'm going to move on then. Let's go to Rick.
Sure, hi. Hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. You're great to be here and representing GRESB today. So for those who don't know us, GRESB is a global organization that assesses and benchmarks the ESG or environmental social governance performance for real estate and infrastructure funds and assets. I head up the infrastructure team, so it's great to be here and represent GRESB and really bring our kind of broad view across the globe, and particularly from the investor's viewpoint. Our members are investors and companies themselves, and they have certainly a view on this issue and do see it as important. So tackling your first kind of question there, it is something that is important and perhaps growing in importance. It hasn't been the #1 top issue. People have been worried about operational carbon, for example, as being a super important issue, starting to worry about physical risk, transition risk, all these kind of issues. But I think it's been there in the background for many years, and it's definitely growing in importance for those who are building infrastructure, building buildings, those who are operating, and those who are investing, because when they're investing in some way in the whole asset. And when they do that, that brings a whole bunch of things with it. It brings, well, what is the asset doing? Who is using the asset? How are they using it? How are they interacting with it? But it also, a little bit more hidden there, brings what's embodied in that asset. What caused that asset to get there in the first place, and what impacts did it have in getting there? And then you start to, untangle that, and you get into the real embodied carbon sort of discussion. And I think investors are starting to get into that. And understanding that that's really an important area. And I think the trend to be improving energy efficiency and reducing emissions in operation is reducing the impact in operation. So as that reduces, as things like LED lighting and things like that come in, that operational footprint reduces, and just by dint of that, the embodied footprint must be getting bigger. Or as a proportion. So that will naturally swing the focus more and more to embodied carbon. So then the problem is, what do we do about it? And we'll talk a bit more about that. So I think that highlights how it is important, but it has been a little bit of a background issue, something people know about, but haven't necessarily been putting their full attention on. In terms of what we're doing, representing those investors, we are taking it very seriously. We're really delighted to be involved in World Green Building Week and also the launch of the report, which we'll talk about. And I think those kind of initiatives of uncovering and understanding are what investors want now, and I think what we need. But we obviously need to move into action as well. So I think that's where we're at in terms of how GRESB can help this effort, is help improving the understanding, help provide the data. That's what we do. We're an ESG data provider for investors and companies. And that's I think how we're viewing it, is how do we help to get this data so that people can make better decisions? And that might be investors, but it also might be architects and companies and others. That's our position on it.
Thanks, Rick. I think it's really interesting is that, as you say, as operation is reduced, then there's a natural swing of awareness towards embodied carbon. And then if we're getting the supply and demand side sort of awareness being raised, then hopefully that can stimulate and accelerate action. Let's try MK again, if I could bring you in. So are you there? I cannot hear you, MK. Just try again, sorry. Okay, well, we will sort. No, can't hear you, sorry, MK. We'll come back to you. I know you've got a lot to say, so we're going to work on this, make sure we get your opinion. But we're going to go to Eugene then. Eugene, how important is embodied carbon? And what are you doing? I cannot hear you either, Eugene. So if you can both check your audio panel and see that you're connected to computer audio, and I'll probably get one of my colleagues to also try and help you. That is a bit raspy, I'm sorry. No, sorry. Okay, so we're gonna take a pause there. And I'm going to then move on to the next question while we work these difficulties out. Apologies to everyone on the call, that this obviously does happen from time to time. So I want to talk about collaboration. I think, Rick, you started to touch on this in terms of investors and the powers that they have. So looking at the supply chain and how we can help each other, I noted that it's quite fragmented and we really need to remove that. So how have you seen supply chains responding, and in what ways? And that's Rick, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. Yeah, look, embodied carbon and supply chain emissions in general are tough. A big part of the reason for that is that it's a natural human tendency to look after what's directly under your control. And embodied carbon, if you like, belongs to other industries. So if we're going to address it, and if we in the built environment kind of space take it seriously and feel that we have an influence and a part to play, it's really mainly going to be through collaboration. There are certainly decisions we can do ourselves to influence embodied carbon, but they all really end up being in some way a form of collaboration. So I think we need to work on that, and I see two main ways that we can do that. The first is through market signals, and the second is through vertical partnerships. So I think we need to kind of step back when we're thinking about embodied carbon and thinking about even a project, and think to ourselves, how can I help those other industries in their decarbonisation efforts? We talk a lot about built environment and what we're doing, and we've got targets, net zero and things like that, which are great, and we start to say, how are we going to get there? And we work as an industry to figure out, as an industry, but also individually, project by project, business by business, how we can do that. There are other industries out there doing that and putting in just as much effort to decarbonize too. Okay, there's variability, and some of the challenges are greater in some industries than others, but they're all working out there. Everyone is getting on board with decarbonizing the economy. So it's very important to understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, where they're coming from, and then figure out how can we help. I think that's just a huge step we can take to accelerate efforts, rather than treat it as, well, we're the ones decarbonizing, how do we make our supply chains decarbonize? I think that view will not lead to good collaboration and will ultimately be less successful than the view that everyone's trying to decarbonize, we all have different challenges. If we can understand each other and what we're seeking and work out how we help each other, we'll all get there faster. So it comes down to a few things: procurement and better decision making. So understand the issues and gain the kind of competency to make comparisons and choices. So if you're an architect, make sure you understand, what are the issues in the supply chain, where, which kind of products have high embodied carbon and so forth, and figure out how you can make better choices around that. You need good data. So to make good decisions, you need good data. So find ways to get that data, make sure it's reliable, etc. That's, I guess, where organizations like GRESB come in. And then we've got to recognize that in that supply chain, there are some, what they like to call in the industry, hard to abate industries, steel and concrete, for example. Their job is much harder in some ways, arguably, than, say, in the built environment to deal with their direct emissions. And that's because the solutions are not necessarily readily at hand, or maybe they're, they haven't scaled up to a sufficient scale yet. So they need to innovate, and that's hard as well. So they need to be able to collaborate over a long time frame. If you say to a steel supplier, I want low carbon steel tomorrow, please, get it at my gate, that's great, that's nice, and that's a signal. But they need a time frame. They need to know that they can perhaps invest lots of money in coming up with low carbon steel, and know that there's going to be a demand for that over decades, and that people are perhaps in the first instance going to pay more for that, because they're just not going to innovate, and they're not going to put the huge investment required into developing new products if they don't have that confidence in the industry and in that sort of collaboration. So getting that level of understanding of the industries, working out how you can support innovation is key. I think the last thing I'll finish on is there's some really good signs though from leading companies. People are definitely working on pilots for steel made using hydrogen instead of coke and coal. Various concretes are around, which with much lower carbon emissions. So, that industry is also working super hard. But we will need to see as well government and industry support to get beyond the pilot projects. It's very hard to get across that innovation gap, and we can play a very supportive role as the built environment.
Thanks very much, Rick. It's really helpful, and I think you're raising some good points around collaboration, how we approach that, the language that we need to see and use. While we have the chance, I believe we've got Eugene and MK. Can we test your mic?
Hi, Matthew. Can you hear me? It's Eugene here.
Hi, Eugene. I can hear you. Let me just double check MK's. No, sorry, MK. Third time unlucky. We'll keep working on that. But Eugene, please jump in. So we're talking about collaboration, communication as a designer. How do you help your supply chains there? Accountability, data, and so on.
Matthew, if you can allow me, if I can just touch on the first question, because I wanted to.
Yeah, please do.
And I'll make sure that I will have a flow.
I'll make sure that I will.
Okay, so.
Yep, we got you now, MK. So I'll come back to you. Sorry, Eugene, please go on.
Yeah, so as Sabana Jurong, we are a design engineer company in Asia, and we, in terms of design and engineering, we are primarily responsible on the carbon footprint in terms of embodied carbon. So it's very important that whatever we put into the building has to be well considered, because if not, that will affect the operational carbon part. And so if you put something that's not good and cheap and good, but cheap and may not be that carbon friendly, what's going to happen in the operational stage is going to be a lot of carbon emission. So we feel that's very important that as we design, as we manage, there must be good carbon accounting to ensure that the embodied carbon at the initial stage is properly accounted for. All right, and we need to work with partners, and I'm very proud. Barbara, congratulations. We are also a big partner in Singapore with Philips Signify Singapore, and we are working very closely in terms of selecting the best lighting so that in terms of operational carbon, we are efficient. So I think it's very important that we must look at the whole carbon footprint, both embodied and operational. And to me, especially in countries whereby there's a lot of turnaround in the building cycle, because taking the building life over 100 years, yes, it's in terms of if it's 80-20, 80% is operational, 20% is embodied. But if building lives are only 50 years, they are only 40 years or 30 years, when you have M blocks and when you hit physical or economic obsolescence faster, this means that embodied carbon becomes more and more important, and that in the circular economic thinking has to be embedded right in the front. If not, you'll be in trouble. And so that's what I feel. So that means that like what Rick has mentioned, we need to give time to suppliers to get themselves onto the carbon bandwagon, and also look at how we can change our processes, how we can work with suppliers, and in this case, the entire supply chain, so that it is not just one or two guys, because one or two guys will not move a needle. It's an entire industry that will actually move the needle in terms of collaboration on in terms of addressing carbon. So that will be my take for the first two questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eugene. It's really insightful there, and I really appreciate. I feel like in the panel it's quite clear that we really need to support the supply side. I'm going to give MK a chance to speak. Finally, welcome, MK, and please answer both questions as you see fit.
Right. Can you hear me? Yeah. Finally, yes. Thank you. Right. Well, I think this is a very good question to us. In many sense, this is essentially sustainable use of resources. Although embodied carbon may not be upfront in many of our discussion previously in our project, but the clients actually are getting more and more aware of such a concept. And during our projects, essentially what we are after is, as I mentioned, sustainable use of resources. The more we can save resources, reduce waste, the more benefit it is to the embodied carbon. And that's why, in the first place, we ask ourselves, can we reuse the buildings or at least partially, to reduce the use of new materials? And there are some projects we propose retaining over 90% of the existing structure that are found to be safe and sound, and that is a great advantage to embodied carbon. And besides using less new materials, we are also very keen to lower or minimize the embodied carbon by reducing construction, steel import or waste export, lightening of the superstructure, and choice of low carbon structural architectural materials. All these actually are becoming our standard design agenda these days. In response to your second questions, in fact, we are seeing a lot of supply chain suppliers responding. The good news and the bad news is, the good news, well, we do have product labeling certifications focusing on embodied carbon, but that's primarily at this moment on structural materials, on concrete and steel, which is majority of the embodied carbon in the building. But at the moment, we are only focusing on structure. And as a designer, as an architect, we are responsible for the specifications and what we put into our projects. That's why we focus on the performance-based specifications, looking for benchmark of those materials and asking, for us, we carry out an embodied carbon assessment before we finish our concept design and to determine the structural systems.
Thanks, MK. So I guess there's when you undertake that sort of concept design, there's an education aspect there for the clients as well. They're trying to work with them to educate. Is that correct? Or?
Yes, they may not be involving in the nitty-gritty of the embodied carbon calculations, but they are more aware of the concept, actually. And they are, as we are working on lowering the operational energy, we are all aware that embodied carbon, that portion is getting bigger and bigger.
Great, thank you. I'd really like to bring Barbara in now, because I remember when we did the pre-session webinar, you had some really great thoughts on collaboration and going further within your supply chain. So take it away, please, Barbara.
Yeah, no, I mean, just very briefly, because I do think quite a bit has already been said, and I fully agree with what Rick and Eugene have also said in terms of not just pushing requirements down the supply chain, but really working in partnership. And this has been really part and parcel also of our sustainability program, Brighter Lives and a Better World, where we encourage on a yearly basis our suppliers to report on Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions and report any emission carbon reductions. But we do this in partnership with the trainings and tools that we provide to them. And in fact, our work with our suppliers and in order to mitigate climate risks in the supply chain has also been recognized by the CDP because we have actually been top ranked on the CDP's first ever supplier engagement rating, which does recognize the leadership that we take when it comes to working with our suppliers and helping them mitigate their own carbon reductions.
Great, thanks, Barbara. So I definitely think partnerships really come out here in this sort of question. And also, I think we touched on a couple of topics here, circularity as one, and then, you know, we can take cement and steel so far, but there is these technologies that need to be innovated and created. So really this collaboration piece sort of focuses on innovation and taking sort of a really sort of long look into the future of where we need to go and having that shared goal and that shared vision. I'm going to take this, so we've got a question from the audience here, and it says here, how strong is the business case for investors to make decisions based on a reduction of embodied carbon in manufacturing, the operational stuff, reducing your process loads and so on? I'm not going to just phrase it as investors. I'd like to just open it up. So now we know there's the collaboration, we can work on it. What is the business case when we're talking to our supply chains about this topic? Who would like to go first? I think let's start with Eugene.
Thank you, Matt. In terms of the business case, I would like to speak on with regards to the building and construction industry. So for developers, where they see the business case of having a low carbon building is on green funds, right? RECs, whereby they'll be able to get lower the cost of funding, which means they improves the internal rate of return. But they are onerous to show that the building is indeed sustainable, is indeed green, and there's a marked reduction in terms of in this case will be operational carbon. But if in order for the developer to do that, he needs to ensure that the designers and the entire value chain, and not only just supply chain, because I believe it's the entire value chain. And how I define value would be not only suppliers, the contractors, the method of construction, or method of deconstruction has to work as one. Because if not, it just takes one kink in the whole value chain, and then things will go very wrong very fast. And not only that, they need to employ technology. So one of the research that we are looking at is also tying up the entire value chain with blockchain. And that is one of the ways that even with companies after 30, 50 years, and you are looking at possibilities of deconstruction, that means you're taking down the material and refurbishing and use it in another building again. Everything is actually captured in the cloud. And maybe companies may not be there anymore because it's 50 to 100 years, but procedures will be there. So they will be able to take down material properly, condition it properly, and then reuse it again. And if you ask me, I think this is really one of the greatest benefits, that you can actually extend the life of some material and really input it into the circular economy. Yeah.
So almost in incentivizing what was traditionally classed as waste. So looking at those sort of changing our mindset on what is actually value and what isn't value.
That's correct.
So Rick, business case for investors or wider on action on embodied carbon?
Yeah, look, it is tough, and that's why it hasn't been the low-hanging fruit. But I've a lot of experience working on infrastructure projects and the like, and what I can say is, if you have an appetite and the energy to get past the kind of initial barriers, there's a great sort of promised land out there with multiple kinds of benefits including financial benefits. But you have to get past these little barriers that are there in front of you first, and they're numerous. They're internal, they're external, they're priced. They seem to be priced. They're all kinds of things, and it's tough. You know, it's really tough to get past those barriers, particularly on a project by project basis, because we've all worked on projects, I'm sure, and you know, timelines are short. You've got to deliver something. You've got to deliver a building, whatever it is. And you don't have time to go and say, oh, I wonder, you know, if we can get this new innovative product. You know, you're trying to order things, you're trying to find suppliers, you're trying to design the thing, and you know, you don't have time to kind of what some people might say is navel gazing or something like that. So it is a really tough environment, but if you can kind of harness that interest and energy early on and get people kind of sparked, and you know, engineers, you give them a target, they love that, and they'll sit down and go for it. So if you can get people really motivated using tools like embodied carbon measurement and things like that have already been mentioned, you suddenly open up these ideas that no one's really thought about in a holistic way before. So you get a group of engineers, say, sitting down and saying, how could we make this structure lighter? Or could we use cross-laminated timber for this building? And, you know, instead of going to the stock standard solution, you suddenly open up a whole new world of way of looking at say, a building. And then you start to see, well, actually, how would we deliver this? Which suppliers would we work with? And actually, you start to see other benefits coming that you didn't even know about. So, you know, cross-laminated timber is a good example. There's plenty of good examples of that on the internet. But these other benefits start to come. The members are lighter. So you can actually lift some things with people. You need lighter cranes. So, you know, you get other benefits around the look and feel of the materials. They're perhaps sometimes easier to repair in situ. They're in operation. They're more pleasant to be around. You know, they might have a nice woody odor and things like this. They have a nice appearance. You know, it's known that people looking at trees and timber and things like that has a psychological calming effect. So all of these kind of benefits sort of start to spin out, and if you can kind of quantify them and you want to know the business case, I think if you can look beyond those initial barriers, it's there. It's absolutely there. Maybe not in every single case, in every sort of scenario, you have to look hard, but once you get past those barriers into that promised land, there's immense benefits there that will outweigh the costs. Now, one thing I wanted to highlight on that is for Asia, and we're talking about this region, the benefits are even bigger. And the reason for that is that where do all these products come from in the main? They're coming from Asia. So the manufacturing of the world, you know, is centered on Asia. This is where those opportunities are for a bit of innovation and suddenly having a market for these new products. And they're often, you can value add to those products. You can charge more for them because they deliver bigger benefits over the life cycle. They may last twice as long. They may provide these other benefits, and customers, once they understand them, are prepared to pay. So I think you see a double benefit there in this region as well.
So really questioning why to then reach the promised land is how I summarize that. There's plenty of benefits that you might not see. I think I'll go to MK, because in that same design sphere, to follow up on Rick's point, do you see the business case around the structure or anything like that and reducing that? What do you see with your clients, or how would you sell it to them?
We have cases that we manage to lighten the buildings, and because especially for high rise and the design of the core, how the build form actually manipulate itself and how it is responding to the wind, and that actually there are many cases that we can optimize the material, optimize the weight, and embody carbon. Especially that is very important for high rise, for the foundations. So that would be a big business case for investor. And on the other hand, I think I would agree that we need to account for embodied carbon much better and make it mainstream. Nowadays, many of the green building certifications, for the energy, it constitutes the greatest amount of credits and points. But when we look at the embodied carbon, they are of very tiny portions. And that well, that does not align with the importance of embodied carbons in in terms of the significance. And I guess the market, the green building councils need to look at how we account for embodied carbon, and that would actually be the tool that the finance associations, when they start to set up tools to which pull in funding support for these, that will be the big considerations when setting up incentive for the building industry to save every ton of carbon possible. So I think that is very important, setting up the tool to mainstream the account of embodied carbon.
Thanks, MK. So we've heard a bit more about some of these sort of voluntary forces that then have pressure and put pressure down on this, and they're part of the business case because they're part of your reporting and so on. I think it's good to bring in Barbara here because I think one business case, which is maybe not purely a business case, but more qualitative, is leadership. And I think Signify is being a leader in lighting and showing their leadership. How have you found that all your work on your carbon neutrality, reducing operations, how has that then affected your business?
Well, I mean, I think, when it comes to lighting, and I say that quite often, I mean, switching to energy efficient lighting is really a no-brainer because there's hardly any other measure that you can take that can bring such incredible energy efficiencies. Just by switching from an incandescent light bulb to LED, you can already save between 50 and 70% of your energy instantly. And when you then connect it to the internet, those energy savings can go up to 80%. So that's why we advocate really that starting with lighting when it comes to any kind of refurbishing or renovation measures, because it's the least disruptive and most energy saving measure that you can take. So it really makes sense to start with lighting. And then in addition to that, there are now innovative business models that have been around for a while, like lighting as a service, for instance, where you don't own the equipment anymore, but you actually only pay for the light that you use. So there are no upfront initial costs, but only the costs that you pay for the usage. And that by itself makes so much sense to actually switch to energy efficient lighting. And we see that there is progress around the world. I mean, I think the effects of LEDs are not questioned anymore, but we would like to see that transition going more swiftly and more rapidly. And this is really where now a big focus of our work and also my work in global public and government affairs is to help governments and businesses alike to really make this transition in a much swifter way.
I think that's a really good point. I think what I've heard from everyone is there's a bit of low-hanging fruit there in terms of different options and really looking at those low-hanging fruit in the first aspects, but then also being conscious and questioning why to understand these innovative solutions, as you say. So products as a service is a massive one, I think, which can contribute and be really helpful in that circularity piece, which to me is the extension of embodied carbon. Embodied carbon then moves into, if you want to really get to net zero embodied carbon, it has to go to circularity and it has to be innovative. So we need to be thinking about these and questioning it going forward. Just a reminder to everyone who's attending, please do submit questions through the question box on the right. We're happy to take them as we just did, and they've proved very fruitful. I am going to pick it up with this panel now. So we're going to start to look at some accelerators. So we talked about the vision, we talked about collaboration and where we need to go. How can we get there quicker? So I'm thinking in this, I'm talking about policy and regulation. We're now we're still in COVID, and we're going to be moving into recovery, so build back better, green economic stimulus. So what role can policy and regulation play is the first part. And then how can we support them? So how can we support the public sector in this? I'll start with Barbara.
Right, thank you very much. Well, I mean, obviously policy frameworks are key because they help for good things to scale faster. And we do definitely need a combination of carrot and stick measures. Carrot meaning renovation, stimuli, and financing. And at the same time, we do also need compulsory regulations and policies. Voluntary standards are important for sure, but they can only be complementary to some measures that need to be enforced. And that is really, I think, key. The other important thing that I believe is that public authorities also have a very important role when it comes to leadership, because if they would lead by example and, for instance, do their public procurement based on performance-based procurement, as Rick mentioned earlier, in terms of not looking at the initial cost, but at the total life cycle cost, we could already see a very important leap forward. So I think we really also need to press our governments and make them accountable to lead by example when it comes to that. I would also, since I'm based in Europe, I would also like to mention the European Commission that has recently launched, due to the COVID crisis now, an economic recovery plan, which is really unprecedented. I mean, I have to say I'm very proud and pleased that the European Commission has taken this crisis, which has affected all countries worldwide, and has not actually stepped back, but actually accelerated its actions, because they really saw this as an opportunity to move forward more quickly. And it really also shows that reducing carbon and economic recovery are not mutually exclusive, but they really go hand in hand. And with this over 1 trillion euro package that has now been launched and which will now be implemented in the different EU member states, we have an enormous opportunity. It is based on 5 pillars, and not surprisingly, 2 of these pillars are very important and key also to the conversation we're having here today, because one is on building renovation, and the other one is on circular economy. So we already see that this is something that is very much on the mind of EU policymakers, and I believe there are tremendous opportunities, and I also would like to congratulate the European Commission for the leadership that it is taking here.
Thanks, Barbara. I think it's I definitely feel the same in terms of the leadership being shown by the EU Commission at this time. I know there's quite a few different governments around the world that are looking at doing this and using their power for good. So hopefully we'll see more as we go along. And policy does have a big part to play in terms of procurement. The weight that they have with their procurement can accelerate and transform markets so quickly. I think I'm going to stick to the European theme. So I'm going to bring in Rick here as well. So being more of a voluntary force, a market force as GRESB, how do you see that? But also, how do you help them push into that political sphere and help them move? And what do we need to see? What should GRESB be advocating to the public sector for?
Yeah, and maybe just first picking up on Barbara's points, yeah, it has been very exciting to see what the European Commission has been doing and the whole of Europe in terms of you know, both the recovery, but even before that, the focus on sustainability has been, you know, front and center for a long time, and you know, it's been sending a pretty clear signal out and working with all the member states to work out that program. And I think what's interesting there is that out of that is becoming a more standardized kind of way of looking at sustainability. And if you look at, say, the EU taxonomy, and I won't go into all the detail, but one of the key environmental focuses of the EU taxonomy, which hasn't been attacked yet really in the taxonomy, but is next up, is circularity. So they very much made carbon the first focus. You know, a little bit narrow, you could say, perhaps, but obviously number one issue. But circularity is on the next set of issues that they're looking at next year, and that will come into the taxonomy pretty quickly. So, by 2022, there'll be circularity components in the measurement and in the definitions of the taxonomy. And the other interesting development there is that everyone around the world is watching that work and looking at it and seeing if they want to adapt it and have their own versions and whatever. And there's a very important partnership between the EU and China, which is looking at this very closely. So I think you'll start to see relationships and models being taken very quickly into Asia that might look something like the EU or be an adaptation, whatever. But this has a flow-on impact around the globe that will happen perhaps more quickly than we might expect. So I think being here in Europe, but being an Australian, we wouldn't necessarily say just do what is being proposed here, but it is good leadership and it is a good example. And I think it does make sense to have a look at what's happening. Circularity is definitely there and definitely being pushed. It has got its challenges, so it'll be very interesting to see how circularity is kind of incentivized through the taxonomy when they sort of come to defining that issue. The other thing we've seen then is investors adapting and adopting that sort of taxonomy as part of their own efforts, and that's through other regulations. There are regulations as part of the EU initiatives that focus on investors and investor reporting and investors responding to these green finance issues. And so very quickly, investors are being regulated and forced to report on these issues, so that gets them very interested. I've seen dozens of memos from lawyers to investors and companies saying, you better figure out how you're going to do this, how you're going to measure these things next year. So very quickly it's become even more mainstream, and there's nothing like a stick of regulation to get people very interested very quickly. So that's definitely a flow on. The voluntary side definitely has a big role to play as well. Carrots and sticks and the like. And so, green building councils and certifications are definitely something that's important. And I think for a long time, they've always had some reference to embodied carbon and life cycle thinking and the like. And I think we'll see that increase. And for GRESB ourselves, we recognize all the major certifications through our tools, through our assessment, and that then provides an incentive. If you're trying to report to your investors on how you're doing well in terms of ESG and sustainability, then that will be reflected through your certifications, through measurements in GRESB in the future that are going to focus on these issues. So I think you get that voluntary side working well with the regulatory side. The regulatory will perhaps initially be largely about reporting, and the voluntary will be more about measuring performance and having a yardstick. But that will perhaps evolve and merge over time as well. On the second point about the industry response to that, we need to do what we can internally, but we also need to become much more knowledgeable about our supply chains and their decarbonisation challenges and efforts, as I mentioned earlier. So I think what people can be doing is to start to identify the biggest contributors to embodied carbon in your supply chains. That will start to give you a good picture, and then start to sort of dig in further and identify who are the innovators within those supply chains. So if a big chunk of your supply chain is, let's say, steel supply, who's doing the best job of decarbonising in that steel supply chain, and then you can start to work out, how is that supply chain being improved. Perhaps even disrupted. There might be new players that are coming, which might not even be the same material, but it's a substitute for that perhaps carbon-intensive material. You need to see who they are, what's going on there, and there might be some there that you can then find a way to support. And we've already mentioned, preferred procurement, other incentives, joint projects, development of standards, and even direct funding. So, and then there's measurement, reporting, rating schemes, and the like. So finding ways to support those innovators is going to put you at the forefront of this. And what it's going to do is, we all talked about business case before. Sure, on an individual project, there might be struggles to make a new innovative product meet a business case. But as a business in the longer term, if you can identify these innovators and work with them, you will position yourself to be at the forefront and you will be at the forefront in terms of the cost curve as well. Because whereas your competitors who don't position themselves to support innovation will be caught out by disruption, and they'll suddenly realize, oh, something's happened in their supply chain. Why is this steel no longer available? You know, this cheap steel that I used to get no longer available, and now I've got to search out these other products. And with these suppliers I've never talked to, you get positioned at the front of that. You're already working with those suppliers to get these new innovative low carbon products into your projects. So you future-proof your business. So I think that you need to look at the business case on that much more longer-term basis for your business and the future of your business, you know, a decade or more ahead. That might be harder to convince your leaders, but visionary leaders get that.
Just quickly, we had a question come through around benchmarking and the sort of numbers regarding what would be relevant. I'm not asking you to pull out a number, but is that something, and putting you on the spot, is that something that GRES would be looking at as they get all that data to then provide? Is it you take that data to then standardize and develop something that industry can then use as part of that business case, and you know, the innovators working together can show we are under said benchmark?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of angles to that, but yeah, definitely that's our business of benchmarking and comparing and providing that sort of data so investors can make better decisions. So again, as this evolves and we get clearer ways to measure circularity, measure embodied carbon that can be comparable, they'll be embedded into the GRESB assessment. And then we can compare those across the globe, across regions, and start to see who's doing well and who's not. And that, you know, that drives market behavior pretty quickly. So there is a little bit of a gap there at the moment in terms of the best known ways to measure these things. You know, we all know life cycle assessment is great, but it's sometimes hard to go to one metric that can then say, here's where we are versus somebody else. But there is definitely work happening on that. And I think as those best tools come to the fore and best metrics come to the fore, they're the kind of thing that will be adopted into the GRESB assessment so that we can benchmark those sorts of issues. But in the meantime, you know, there are many tools out there that you can already use. Life cycle analysis and environmental product declarations, these kind of tools are mainstream, are readily accessible, are not expensive. I really recommend people to start to get to grips with those tools, because the metrics that start to be applied universally, will be using those tools, will be using those metrics in some way. They'll just be adapted to, you know, to suit, you know, per square meter or some other intensity metric that's appropriate for the industry.
And those tools are looking to work together to keep expanding their databases. They're partnering with universities, academia who are doing searches. I know Ariane in Singapore is doing the same. So it is a space to continue watching. Coming to Eugene and MK now, I want to just add a little regional focus here. So we've heard about what Europe's doing, Europe's leadership, and some of these tensions, so EU taxonomy or the Green New Deal and some of those criteria. I just want to sort of give our attendees a view of where is Asia Pacific at in this topic, and then what is the pull from is there a pull from Europe? Are we conscious of what they're doing in terms of circularity, and is that something to try and mimic? I'll start with MK. Are you there, MK? So I will go to, yep, you're there.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think in terms of how we can support the public sector regulatory the actions better. If we just look at Hong Kong, it's not easy. We talk about green recovery, but when we talk about putting in new regulations, it's quite a challenge for Hong Kong these days politically. But I don't think this is the end of the story. We should, as mentioned by Rick and Barbara, we have to show that the market is ready, and the market is ready in how this would make business sense, and how the voluntary systems can measure and cater for such a performance. And on the other hand, from a consultant, architect, or even engineers, I think we need to prepare ourselves. Capacity building is very important. How to design low carbon buildings, and what is the design implications when we work on the design process, especially at the start, when we choose the structural systems, when we choose the building layout, site dispositions. These impact embodied carbon decisions very much, and you can't go back. Okay, so and that capacity buildings for the professionals are very important. How to simplify the building systems, to use less materials, and that needs to that needs a process to trigger from the very start of the design. And but we do have we need to capture the opportunity of digital design, where we can measure the amount of materials, optimize the conflict of different systems, or reduce the conflict of different systems. I think digital design and moving on to DFMA, reducing waste, I think that is, again, very important. So from a professional point of view, I think we can do much better. For ourselves, we do have transitions from the traditional design to digital design, and we do have a roadmap. Many companies do have a roadmap for doing that as well, and it will be talking about not 4 or 5 years. It's talking about next year's. Many companies in Hong Kong and in China, actually, we have to reach the next stage, another phase of digital design capability, and that is something we understand. I understand the industry, the professionals are preparing to do. So capacity building, this is the main point I would like to add.
Thanks, MK. And Eugene, just coming in on that. So the drivers: financial, voluntary, regulation, and then also Asia Pacific as a whole. Do tell us, please.
Right. Just now, Barbara raised a very good point on getting governments to come in and with carrot and stick. So I can see that in Asia or even Southeast Asia, first and foremost, they do see what the West are doing, and we learn, right? So BREEAM LEED first came out, and in Singapore we have Green Mark, Lotus in Vietnam. Even in Malaysia they have Greenery. So they do look for the best practices, and then they customize it to the local countries and local cities and municipals. Because each cities may have their own nuances. But I think most importantly is that we must be able to, or each city, each country, in terms of respond to carbon, is to be able to have a response that is to their climate, to their own uniqueness. Because, for example, like in Singapore, we look into a lot into energy. Okay, energy and maintenance. So a lot of up to more than if we were able to save up to 35, 40, 45% of energy, that actually helps in terms of the lowering of the operational carbon. But I think to build on what Barbara actually mentioned, I think not only should we have the carrot and stick, that means some incentives and some legislations. I believe, and this is a very strong point, that governments will have to be coordinated, because there are many agencies, there are many departments, and sometimes there's one agency or one ministry may go this way, and another ministry may go that way. And it's I think MK as a designer, and on our part, we do see sometimes ministries don't come together. One, we suggest something is good for this ministry, and it may not be conforming to the other. So I do believe that if we do want to move as a one world to on this regime, there must be something on the interministerial. When I say interministerial, really is interministerial. Someone sits down and coordinates all everything together, so that it's not designers we have to do 5 times because there are 5 ministries asking for the same thing, but we do it once, and there will be a lot more productivity. There will be a lot more reason, and there'll be a bit more data that's going to come out from that, and that is more coordinated. That's where my second point is on digital, right? I think Rick and MK has alluded the fact that we need to have digital, like for example your BIM models, to have this carbon tools inside. You can come up with a carbon plan. You'll be able to use blockchain to trace back traceability and a single source of truth, in terms of how you deconstruct or in terms of looking at adoption of reversible designs. It's I'm just really hitting the tip of the iceberg. And Matthew, you mentioned about right now we are all in the COVID situation. We are employing digital, and we're getting this little token here. Is a Bluetooth low energy device that now tracks who I'm in contact with, and I have to elect it. That means I have to press it to elect that I want myself to be traced, and I will be able to know who are the guys that are affected 2 tiers, 3 tiers down, so that we can be business as usual fast. And that's what we need now to recover from this COVID, because who knows, there may be heaven forbid, but there may be other things that's actually coming, right? So digital is something which I believe that it will enhance the way we will tackle climate change, increase sustainable design, give more options to designers. You can use it with, for example, computational and programmable. You can use AI. That we are using it now to help us into the different iterations. What would have taken engineers weeks and months to do can be done in minutes now, because the computer takes over that design. And you know what? In the end of the day, you have more options, better visibility. You have wisdom, in terms of how the whole world as one can move in one voice, whether in terms of tackling climate change, sustainability, or even carbon. That's what we're discussing today. If again, back to the chain, if any of this chain is broken, that means digital is not used, governments ministries are not coordinated, we are not talking as one as the world, in terms of, and only one country is looking at something and the rest are not. It's going to be to me, it's going to be very difficult, because we're not talking on the same plane. So I think this is the elephant in the room, whereby we have to address that. And so long as we don't, then we are still islands of people trying to do something, and we're not moving it as one. That would be my feel.
Thanks, Eugene. I think what you raise is really important. So the transparency across these different regions, this digital technology will be able to help us with that, to understand what these implications mean. I think when we're talking about agencies working together, we sort of talk about roadmaps. So looking at roadmaps which involves all of industry, all of these agencies all coming together in that collaboration supply chain aspect, to know where they need to go, so how they need to act and work together. And then local adaptation is always very important. So we can learn a lot of each other, but we need to, when we learn, be cognizant of how it's going to be effective in that locality as well. We are coming towards the end of time, so I've just got one last question which was submitted to us, and it's basically a language question, really trying to understand. So they try and understand, when we talk about this topic to people and reducing carbon footprint, that often involves changing raw materials or certain things like that. How do we try and help customers or industry to feel less hesitant on this topic? In my interpretation, that's a language thing. So how should we talk about this? 1 minute each, please. I'll start with Eugene.
I think in order to make everybody understand, we must be able to communicate the end result, the outcome, why we are doing it, you know, and how it actually affects their heartstrings, so that it's not a situation whereby, you know, it doesn't concern me, but, you know, it really concerns everyone. So we need to have an ease of understanding, and I think there's no one shoe size will fit all, because there are different types of learners. There's kinesthetic learners, there's audiovisual, and so on and so forth. So the messagings have to be again coordinated to be able to reach out to all people of different walks of life, whether private, public sector, and so that, you know, they will be able to understand the outcomes and messaging in their own level, own languaging, and own understanding. It won't be easy, I must say, but I believe if that is actually done, then it will be a bit more holistic in our approach in adoption.
Thanks, Eugene. Barbara?
Yeah, thank you. I think that the good news is that we know what needs to be done, and we have the technologies to achieve a carbon neutral world by the year 2050. As you rightly said, a lot of it is communication and how to communicate it. And the problem with energy efficiency is that it is sometimes, I mean, let's face it, it is considered a boring topic. I mean, you don't get, as one of my colleagues recently said, you don't get a Tesla out of it. It's usually invisible, so it's much more exciting and newsworthy to inaugurate a solar panel. And don't get me wrong, renewable energy is very important, but energy efficiency comes first. And the actions are not that exciting. So what we are trying to do is to link those energy efficiency measures with other actions. And when you, for instance, show the kind of jobs that are being created by energy efficiency, then that already becomes a more interesting topic. Another example I would like to give, which the Rockefeller Institute has done some time back, is they actually measured that if we would increase globally the rate of energy efficiency from currently 1 to 1.5% to 5%, we would be able to unlock the entire energy that is needed to power 240 million electric vehicles by the year 2040. So what I'm saying here is that you're linking a quote-unquote boring topic with a very exciting topic, because everybody wants to talk about the electric vehicles, and that way the entire conversation becomes a bit more dynamic, and people can see that energy efficiency is not just important by itself, but has many opportunities for other important actions that we need to take.
Well, what I think you've done there is you said that energy efficiency isn't linked to Teslas, but I think you just proved yourself wrong. You actually linked electric vehicles to energy efficiency. So there you go. Okay, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, the way I would say it is mainly boils down to using less. By using less material, simpler systems, which all translated to lower cost. And also we should also be mindful of using less from a time perspective, meaning we should extend the service life of whatever material or systems we are using. And this is, again, very important. And last but not the least, I think people like visible things. When you can translate the concept into something visible, this is very important. And using less actually translated to a different aesthetics. And we need to put that up front and take opportunity of that, of using less, and demonstrate that it would be showing to other people that you are making a difference. I think this is very important. Make it visible.
Thanks, MK. Rick?
Yeah, it is a tough one to know what kind of language is going to work the best to motivate people in the region. But I think, you know, some of the panelists have talked a fair bit around sort of future technology, digitalization, those kind of things. And I think that is an exciting area. If we can look in this region particularly at those exciting opportunities around those technologies, I think that gets people pretty excited pretty quickly. People love to work on, you know, a new project that involves new tools, new ways of looking at things, new products. Manufacturers love to be, you know, first out with a new product that customers want, because it puts them in a good space and opens up new markets. You know, particularly, let's say, it might expand their market in Europe. So I think if we can use that kind of language and get people excited about the opportunities, then, you know, I think we've already seen, you know, the Asian region run off with those opportunities in the past and lead the world in manufacturing and some of those sorts of industries by using technology better than anybody else. So I think that could be a good way to talk about it.
Thanks, Rick. So just summing up everyone's points in terms of language here, I've got caring, visual, appealing, and then opportunity, so achievable opportunity. So I kind of group that under tangible, making these things that aren't tangible more tangible through those sort of analogies or concepts. So we are going to do key takeaways. We're at the end of the session. So in 10 words or less, what would you like to leave our attendees with? I'll start with MK.
I think we need to actually trigger a system change. We are talking about a system to measure, a system to train, a system actually to procure, and it needs the system change. And well, the government, Hong Kong GBC, well, the GBCs of different countries, I think we all need to play a part on making this possible.
Thanks, MK. I'll go to Eugene.
10 words, right?
Yeah, 10 words. I'm watching you.
Yeah. The future is in your hands. Please do start now.
Oh, nice. Well done. Very well done. Rick.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's 10 words, but I would say support the innovators in other industries and send signals to manufacturers that the game is changing.
About 20, but yeah, definitely very important. Innovators, very important. Digital, we've heard that all through today. And Barbara, to finish off.
Yeah, perhaps to come back to my earlier, what I said earlier about using this global pandemic as an opportunity. This crisis can be an opportunity, and we should really move forward and tackle carbon emissions for our climate neutral planet by the year 2050. And we know it can be done.
Beautiful. Thank you, Barbara. I think a lot of things that we've discussed today, this is my key takeaway. It's not 10 words. I'll apologize straight up, but is what we sort of discussed in our reports previously. We're looking at innovation, we're looking at education, we're looking at collaboration, we're looking at digitalization to get to these hard to achieve circular models and so on. So really these are key things that we need to then put under a roadmap or something similar where we can have that shared vision, shared goal, where we can take those actions. So I'm going to ask all the panelists, I'm going to say thank you very much to give us a wave, and I'm going to ask you to turn off your cameras and your mics. Thank you again for today. I really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my screen, everyone. Can we see my screen? I don't think we can. Okay. Apologies for the delay there, everyone. So we should now see my, yes. So my other key takeaway for today is that we are launching the Asia Pacific Embodied Carbon Primer. So that is building on the success of last year's global report on embodied carbon. We are now doing a follow-up report, which is solely focused on the Asia Pacific region. This is a more foundational topic for the region, and our primer seeks to establish opportunities to stimulate action, which will accelerate and promote reduction of embodied carbon by the whole construction value chain in Asia Pacific. And a lot of the themes that we touched on today are included within this primer, looking at innovation, digitalization, and so on. So the primer sets out what embodied carbon is, where it occurs through the life cycle, and importantly, probably central to this discussion, why it is important for Asia Pacific to address. So we look at here the supply chain sort of focus, so bringing in some of that European perspective and what that might mean for the manufacturing powerhouses of India and China. We look at the way that we can help raise awareness and education through easy to use tools and so on. So I do really recommend that you visit our website. That the link to our article and the report will be placed in the chat for everyone to see. And my colleague has done that there for you now. So please do go have a look. It's launched today, have a read, and come up with some actions that you can take today to start reducing embodied carbon. So we're coming to the end. Don't forget that you can join our call to action by endorsing our statement and support the campaign to accelerate net zero buildings through policy. This call to action statement is open to everyone to endorse. So please go to our website and you can see it there, and you can join along with 100 other organizations globally who are calling for this. So we've come to the end. I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today in this important discussion. A massive thank you to our panelists. So everyone that we have, all of our panelists today, it's been a great discussion full of insights, and for the audience for sending in the questions around business case and language, really important questions that we really appreciate. Please do have a look at our other sessions this week, the ones that previously gone on YouTube, or join Dominica tomorrow looking at regenerative design. The last thing I'd like to say is that we must act on climate, and for our sector, net zero buildings are the answer. Thank you, everyone.